they pulled up those wooden pylons. They knew they were only about 100 years old, and the bottom of those wooden pylons had coalified, and they were complete coal when they pulled them up. Didn't take millions of years, only took 100 years. We can produce natural gas and oil and coal in... Oh, I thought that was almost like an emergency vehicle outside or something.
They're backing up.
Yeah, really. I thought, man, we got a truck about to come through that wall right here. Watch it, boys. Watch it. So, this idea of the coal and the oil, you don't need millions of years. Now, in the 80s, when Mount St. Helens exploded, there was a huge wash of trees. They washed about 1 million trees off of the side of Spirit Lake, put a big mat of vegetation on the top of Spirit Lake, and as they started watching that, that mat of vegetation started falling to the bottom of Spirit Lake and forming what they think could eventually be one of those big coal, peat, bog, vegetation type things. And it happened very quickly. In fact, wiped out 1 million trees in one huge eruption, and those were put on the surface of Spirit Lake just like that. So, is there a problem with massive vegetation and animal matter being buried and bringing about coal and oil? No. What's a good explanation for that? The flood. I mean, you start killing off everything that's on the surface of the earth and you start burying it very quickly, and you have very high pressure pounding down on that. You don't need millions of years. You could get it done in 100 years, a couple hundred years, 1,000 years. So, yeah, dinosaurs and other vegetation would be a good explanation for that, but the millions of year scenario that you're often given, that would be what would be wrong with it. Good question. Neanderthals, were they real? Appendix in people have read that it used to be for us to digest plant material. Okay, two good things. Neanderthals, were they real? Absolutely, positively, yes. You know what they say about Neanderthals? Here's what's so ironic about evolution. It doesn't matter what piece of information they give you, they fit it into their series of evolution regardless of what it is. For instance, when you start looking at the stuff like Lucy and primates that supposedly evolved into humans, they say, well, this was pre-human because it had a smaller skull than humans, and humans started to evolve larger skulls, and the larger skulls they had meant that they were more intelligent. And so this was a pre-human because it had a small skull, and this looks like it's getting closer to human because its skull's getting a little bit bigger and it's getting closer to human size. Well, the Neanderthal skull was bigger than humans. So if you're going to follow their scenario, should Neanderthals have been much smarter than us? Oh, absolutely. But, you know, it just so happens that we know that there's no correlation between smarts and the size of a person's brain. And that's a good thing, because some of us have very smaller brains and some of us have very bigger brains, but that has nothing to do with intelligence. However, in their scenario, lots of times when you're down here with Lucy, they say, oh, well, getting bigger and they're getting more intelligent. But then when you get to Neanderthal, it's already bigger than a human. So really, according to what they've been telling us, Neanderthals should be superhuman geniuses. Well, but then how do they present Neanderthals? Not as superhuman geniuses, do they at all? No. Do you know that they say that the Neanderthal skulls and bones, etc., fit into the known range of human bones? In fact, they say if you saw a Neanderthal on the street of New York with a clean-cut haircut and a shave and was dressed in New Yorkers' clothes, you wouldn't be able to tell a difference between that Neanderthal and a human. Now let's think about that just for a second. All you've got is bones, and you say the bones fall in the natural range of human bones, although on average they're a little bit thicker, more robust. If they fall into the natural range of human bones, and you wouldn't be able to tell the difference between them and a New Yorker, then what are you dealing with? If all you got is bones, you're dealing with something that is human. Every single find in any type of paleontology can be divided into two groups. There are only two groups: human or not human. They all fit perfectly in one of those two groups. Neanderthal bones fit perfectly in human ranges. Now, on average, did they have bigger skulls? Yeah, on average they did. But do you know, there are people all over the place. And when I was in Montgomery, there was a guy with a really, really big head. And it was as big or bigger than the Neanderthal skulls. So would they have dug up this guy's head years from now and say this was some different kind of creature? Yes, if they're using the same kind of thinking that they're using with Neanderthal. Now, there are some things about some Neanderthal bones that lend the data to thinking that something was going on with their bones. Looks like they could have had rickets. Sometimes their bones are deformed and softer, and that would be probably because they might have lived in much cooler temperatures where they didn't get out in the sun and they didn't have the vitamin D production that they needed, and so they got rickets from not having the vitamin D production that they needed, and they had some deformation of their bones and some things like that. But no Neanderthal bone has ever been proven to be any kind of missing link or cross between a human or anything else. They have been identified clearly as the bones of humans. Now, they threw a label Neanderthal on them to call them pre-humans or whatever, but they're not. They're just human bones, and that's what you're dealing with. Now, the second question was, appendix in people. I've read that it used to be used to digest material in plants, but it's not anymore. Here's what this guy's talking about. This question is, in the human body, there are supposed to be something called vestigial organs. Vestigial organs are supposed to be organs that aren't used anymore, that your primate ancestors used to use, or ancestors before your primates used to use, but now you don't need them anymore, and so they're started to get smaller, and they're just leftovers. The word vestigial just means leftover. So supposedly you've got a bunch of leftover organs in your body that you don't use, appendix, your tonsils, your wisdom teeth, your, there used to be about 100 of them. Well, guess what? People started studying the 100 vestigial organs that they said were vestigial and that you didn't need. And they said, oh, no, that's not a vestigial organ. Actually, that's got a real good use. No, that's not a vestigial organ. Actually, and they just started looking at the appendix. And they said, oh, really, your appendix is actually very, very helpful. Your appendix houses bacteria that sometimes when your intestines get really, really sick and they flush themselves out of bacteria, they get rid of good bacteria as well as bad. And you need somewhere to store the good bacteria. Guess where it's stored? In your appendix often, and there are other lymphatic tissues in your appendix that keep infection down. Now, can your appendix erupt and cause you serious problems? Oh, sure. Can your heart attack you and cause you serious problems? What does that mean, your heart's vestigial? No, just because you might have problems with something. Now, could you cut your appendix out and still live a pretty normal life? I hope so. I guess I'm not all that abnormal, and I haven't had an appendix for years now. Could you cut your pinky off and still live a pretty normal life? Yeah, is your pinky helpful? Yeah, but could you get along pretty well without it? Could you cut half of the top of your ear off and get along pretty well with it? Sure. Are there all kinds of stuff that you could get along all right without, but you'd still rather have? Sure there are. So the idea of vestigial organs, we have proven that the 100 vestigial organs that they said were vestigial, every single one of them has a very good purpose and has things in the body that it's very useful for. Also, here's what's ironic about that. If evolution really were taking place, you don't need organs that are getting worse. You need nascent organs that are evolving into something much better. So instead of an appendix that's getting smaller and useless, you should have something in your intestines that's getting better and is showing something amazing that nobody's ever seen. You should have nascent organs that are like you should have evolving telescopic eye nodes that are evolving into something that's going to allow you to see, 2100 vision or whatever. But you don't see any of that, do you? So you see how evolution, whatever information you give them, they just plug it in one place or another. They say, well, you got a bunch of leftovers in your body. And you say, well, they're not really leftovers. No, we don't. And then when you ask, where are all the organs that are supposed to be evolving into better stuff? Well, they don't give you an answer for that because there's not an answer for that because you don't have any organs that are evolving into better stuff. So that's what you would need if evolution really were the case. All right, good question. What about new species of animals and how animals lose things that they don't need anymore? Okay, this is a very, very good question. New species, but it's two questions in one. Can animals, and humans for that matter, lose things that they don't need anymore? Yes and no. As far as bacterial resistance is a great example of that. Think about it like this. It's kind of a difficult question to answer just because it gets a little technical, but think about it like this. Suppose you have an antibody that, let's say you have a bacteria that has a right and left hand. All right? This bacteria, just work with me, just think about a little blob of bacteria and it's got two hands, a right and a left. And the antibiotic attacks the bacteria by hooking on to its left hand. And that's how it kills the bacteria. You understand that? All right, we got it. So it's killing these bacteria.